This is a D6 generation pip. Bite-sized content for a busy gamer. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ.
Hey, what about me?
Oh yeah, and sometimes featuring Raef, Hollywood Granger.
Well, hello. Welcome back, everybody listening to the Raef Granger Hollywood Minute on the D6 Generation Pip. Pip, our bite-sized gaming content. I have with me today my good friend and gaming partner, I guess, if you will, Ryan Morency. And on this Hollywood Minute, I'm going to pick his brain about Sandbox games. And then in the next Hollywood Minute, we're going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV in detail. So a little bit of a reason why I wanted to have Ryan on the show. Ryan always helps me. He's so nice and kind and patient when I learn a PC game, because I often sort of get stuck or don't know how to do certain things or don't. And it's always the most basic things. Like you might be sitting there listening and be like, hey, Raef, there's this thing called Google. But what I find is I often don't even know the thing's so simple. It's not even, nobody did a video on it, you know? Like, so anyway, so Ryan, welcome to the Hollywood Minute.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Okay. So I want to talk to you about just your role, at least with me. Like I do find you to be extra patient. You're not condescending. You take the time. Like there'll be times you talk to me for a whole hour on what the games, what to expect for the game, what to look out for, what are some good ways to get started, but you also don't spoil it. And I just wondered, like, do you know you do that role, or you just are a good friend, or what do you think about that role that you have?
Well, I'm definitely a good friend. You should definitely say that a lot. But no, I think, in not just, I guess, my gaming, but right, like you know me pretty well, right? And I very much like reading. I like doing the research. I like min-maxing my character. I like to know when I dive into something, and it could be anything. It could be hobbies, right? It could be airbrushing, minis, whatever. Mm-hmm. Like I go all in on everything that I do, and I like that. I enjoy it. But then throughout my professional career, I've been in a lot of management roles. So like training, how to talk to people, how to be patient with people. Everybody needs to be managed differently. Not saying I'm managing you as a friend, right? But those skills just, I guess, probably help me in explaining concepts and things like that. And so thanks for the compliment.
Yeah, you're welcome. Do you find, is it just me that you're like, oh no, I do this for all my friends, or is it just me that's a doofus when it comes to gaming in your world?
So I'd say I do that for a lot of people in my life outside of just gaming, right? So like, because you and I have tech support conversations a lot, like, hey, what gadget, what TV, and like, so like, our friend Chris Flores, right? He might call me up to talk about TVs or sound stuff, or like my sister might call me about laptop questions, or right, like, so I'd say I'm like a generic tech support for my circle of people. I'd say gaming wise, like we've been pretty fortunate to have a good group of friends that have gamed together for a long time. And I would say the majority of our friends are fairly proficient at gaming and stuff like that, right? Like Greg, I don't have to handhold Greg with games because he likes research. He's like I am, right? But like, there's, I think all of our friends run the spectrum, right? Like of, noob, not so technical, doesn't like the research, and the min-maxers that are out to do this to win silver medals and gold medals and compete in the gamer Olympics, so
right.
Whatever. I'm easygoing, I guess. And I don't mind helping people. I like doing it. So
it's part of the fun for you. It sounds like.
Exactly. Right. But I also like, part of it too is selfishly, I like gaming with my friends, and I know that if I can hook you in and help you out a little bit, right? Oh, hey, here's my pocket healer Raef coming along to help me out in this instance, right? So
right.
I'm not going to say I'm a amazing philanthropist. I mean, I'm also doing this selfishly. I want to hang out with my friends and do stuff, right? So
I think it's Ayn Rand. I think I could be getting this wrong. The like famous philosopher that like there is nothing that we do that doesn't have a selfish component to it. Like, handing a homeless person on the street food makes us feel good as a human. All that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I get that. So I want to talk to you about open sandbox gaming, and then if there's listeners like me that sort of get stuck with those, but I wanted to go back to a different thing. Yeah, the joke between Ryan and I don't know if other people do this, but I'm like, Ryan just likes all the same things I like. So if I'm like, hey, what's a good meat grilling thermometer? He's like, this one. And he's done like all the research on it. What's a good gaming pad I should have? You want the Razer Tataris #2, not the #1, the #2. I just email him and he just tells me. And I'm always a little sticker shocked. I'm like, wow, like that thing costs like this much. But I'm like, well, it probably does for a reason. And the gadgets, I love every single one. They never fail me. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Like a headset. You told me to buy a headset. It was like, $225. I'm like, oh, I'm used to spending for it. So comfortable. I can wear that headset all day long.
Yep. I grew up, my dad taught me, buy it right one time. Don't buy it
Good
cheap
lesson.
because you're going to be buying it again. And then you're going to buy it cheap again because you don't want to spend the money. And, just do your research, buy it right once. And
that's the key. I don't have the patience for the research. So I might buy something that's expensive just because it's expensive or has a name,
Sure.
But
I'm also incredibly picky with my gadgets. So I've probably been through, 100 something headsets in my lifetime. Right. So like part of it is you get to benefit from me throwing away my money.
That's right. I think the newest gadget is the Steam Deck that's coming out. I'm looking in my mind. I don't have already 12 uses for it, but I'm like, Ryan's like, nope, you're going to want a Steam Deck. I'm like, okay, so I'm just buying a Steam Deck, and I'm like, what memory size do I want? You're like, you want this one. So anybody out there listening, what Steam Deck should people be buying?
Oh, geez. There's 3 different versions. I consider them 2 different versions, right? There's the high end, and then what I'd say is the lower end models. The difference between the two, I think the high end has a anti-glare, like a higher quality screen, like the glass on it's better. But it also has the biggest hard drive space, and I am impatient. I like to keep a lot of games on my system. So like, I'm in the mood for a strategy game. I'm going to play Civ 6. I'm in the mood for a shooter. I'm going to go do this or whatever. So I like to keep a library of stuff on my machine. So the extra drive space, the drive itself is also faster on the high end model. So, right, your read and write times are faster, so you can load your games faster. So if, money's not, and I don't think the price difference is that much.
Not that much.
I would recommend to anybody that likes gaming and is impatient like I am, buy the high end model. You get faster performance out of it. But I think the Steam Deck at the lower price point is still a very good device, and you can get memory cards and stuff like that to expand the hard drive space over time anyway. So again, right, like I want to buy it once because I don't have to mess with it, and I know it's going to do what I want it to do. You want to save a little money, buy the entry level one, and then as you get pissed because you're constantly uninstalling and reinstalling games, you'll say Ryan was right, and then you'll buy a memory card, and all will be right with the world. So
right. If you didn't already have an entrepreneurial day job venture, you should have the website like Ryan says. Buy this and just it's like Angie's List, but for gadgets or something.
I guess, yeah.
I did hear about. I think he's a UNH grad, but I could have that wrong. This is brilliant. He created a website that matches like college aged people coaching. So like Lou being, 21, he plays, D3 lacrosse. And then here I am, a dad of a high school lacrosse player. It's the summer. There's nothing for them to do. The lacrosse players, 14 or 15. And it's like you hire a Lou to go to the field and do lacrosse for 2 hours.
Right.
Really, it's just 2 hours of get the kid out of the house and off the screen. Sure. And the coach gets like $45. So they get these student athletes to do this type of thing because it's better than bussing tables. But the brilliant part is the kid who made the website. Yeah. So he takes, whatever his cut is right off the top.
Taking a percentage fee off the top, and you don't have to do anything for it, right?
Love that entrepreneurialness.
Yeah. It's funny. My business partner and I talk about that, right? Like, in the gold rush, right? You don't want to be the guy sitting there clinking away, mining the golds. You want to be the guy at the beginning of the line selling the shovels and the pickaxes to go mine the gold, right? Like do the least amount of work and make the most amount of money, like, right? Like, you know,
and it's not relying on luck of striking gold, because
that too.
There's 20 people buying pickaxes, but only one's going to strike gold.
Exactly. Right. So,
all right. Anyway. What do you think of this total tangent, as is typical of Hollywood Minutes? I had this idea. So, because you're part of it, I have these master classes, and they are 8 to 10 business people in a room once a month, and we do businessy stuff. Okay. I read about professional DMs, dungeon masters.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
And they're like, the pay is like $40 to $50 an hour for the DM. And I'm sure to a lot of DMs are like, oh my God, that's awesome. I don't have to work at Starbucks.
Right.
I'm like, is there a market for the more professional gamer? These are people that make $250 a year, $500,000. And this is going to sound very snobbery. I'm going to say that up front. But I get asked, this part's not snobbery, I get asked probably 4 times a month by like all the business people I know, hey, I'm watching Stranger Things. I never played D&D ever. I know you play D&D. Raef, would you run a dungeon for us?
Right.
And I'm like, sure. Just out of the content, like, why not introduce more people? But then I'm like, I wonder if I could create like a once a month. It's not masterclass. It's DM 2-hour sessions, and they pay masterclass prices, which is currently $550 per session. Right.
Sure.
And that draws in the professional person. Here's the snobbery part, because maybe that professional person doesn't necessarily want to be, stereotypical guy in his basement who's dropping the F-bomb. Hugely stereotypical. Send all the emails to Russ Wakeland at the D6generation.com. But the point, look, let's face it, like, there are really elite golf clubs. I'm not a member of those, right?
Yep.
There's a place for it, is what I'm getting at. All right. What do you think of this idea?
I think that's interesting. I'd say, right, like anytime I ever evaluated any kind of entrepreneurial idea, I would, right, like, what's the competition like, right? Is there already a marketplace or a way to hire professional DMs, right? Fiverr, some of the freelancing sites, like maybe this already exists, right? So besides whether or not is the idea good, right?
Well, that exists,
viable for a business,
but it exists at the $50 an hour rate,
right? Yeah.
As far as I know, it could be $500 an hour. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, right. So it's 2 parts. 1, how are you qualified to run a professional DM group? And 2, right, because you have to prove that, right? If you're going to put a big sticker on something, you have to show that expertise, right? So you'd need, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about more logistics of actually running something like this now. So you know me.
Yep.
I think it'd be an interesting idea. I don't know that there's a huge market for it. There could be.
That's my thought. I'm not sure there's a huge market for it.
I think you've got people that grew up around D&D, comic books, video games, and if they're interested in something like that, they've probably gotten into it before they became an old professional like us, right?
See,
so, I'm
telling you, I get asked it at least 5 times a month.
Really, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised, especially because, right, like D&D has become popular, right? And it wasn't always like that, right?
No.
We've only seen that happen. I don't know, I'm dating myself now, but it maybe like 10 years, the last 10 years, like
right.
being nerdy has become popular or whatever it is. Right. And D&D has gotten some popularity. So I could see right now the people that when they were kids, they didn't do it because it wasn't cool. Right. And so now it's become socially acceptable. So now they're maybe willing to give it a try. So I guess you're right. I could see that.
See, here's what makes me think it's crazy. Would I pay somebody $350 to run a DM? No, absolutely not. I have 5 people around me. With the people we hang out with, no. These are the people that are watching Stranger Things.
Yep.
They make $250 plus. They want to know what's going to happen. It's just like a golf league. They show up, they get their golf in. They're with the people that they want to hang with.
Right.
I don't know. The only reason
it's funny because when I worked at Wayfair, right, like there was a couple guys there that were DMs and stuff. And they actually ended up doing like a one-off campaign with people that didn't know D&D, that were they'd hear the nerd talk around the office and they're like, hey, what is that? And so it turned into some team building activities, and everybody really liked it. They were like, this is actually kind of cool. Like, I get to pretend to be somebody else. I can talk in a stupid accent, and I'm horrible at accents, and I can drink beer and have a good time and hang out with my friends. Like, and that's what it is, right? It's a playground, and you can kind of do whatever you want. And we get into some ridiculous scenarios, but I know people that weren't. Yeah, you're right. There's people out there that haven't ever done it. It sounds interesting when you hear about it, and it might be neat. So give it a shot.
Here's the part that's making me, maybe I will do it someday. I don't know. Here's the part that's making me not do it. There's two parts. One is, I know from my own entrepreneurial business, I have goals where I want to put butts in the chair for masterclass. And then I could be like, squirrel, create new business ventures. So I'm resisting that. Yeah. And also, so many times I've turned my love or my passion into a job, to when I then hate my job or my passion. It happened with magic. When I did magic tricks for kids, I was doing 4 shows a weekend. I was making huge bank. Yeah. I was booked solid, had no weekends, and began to hate doing magic. I've never really painted professionally, but a couple times people have paid me some money. Hated it. The minute I'm being told to do it. So I know me, and I think by session 4, unless I'm really committed to it, unless I'm really like, this is what I want to do, I might be like, I don't want to run a stupid dungeon.
I'm the same way. Like, with hobbies and stuff, as soon as you start trying to turn it into a business or get paid for it, you like 3D printing, right? Dave and I tried the 3D printing business. Like, I loved it at first. It was super cool. I could print whatever the heck I wanted. And I was in the 3D industry, so I could even make my own models and then print them out. It was awesome. I could hold them in my hand. As soon as we started trying to do it as a business, it sucked.
It sucks.
Like, oh yeah, it's horrible. Like, now I'm beholden to this thing. I can't just do it when I want. There's responsibilities there. Somebody puts in an order at 2:00 on a Friday. I have to package that shit up and print it and send it out. And
there's only one person in my life. Have you met Doc yet, or have you only heard of him by reputation?
No, just heard of him.
Okay, because he has traveled up here, but it's been a while since COVID. Anyway, he ran an eBay game store. Like before, right? Same kind of eras, Miniature Mart and stuff like that. And he got his start because he loved 40K. And he would buy the big box kits, and they come with the 10 Space Marine bikes. But Ryan only wants the 10 Space Marine bikes, doesn't want the other kits. But he would know that you also want the Last Cannon bike. And so he basically would kit bash and combine the sets in what you would want to purchase versus what GW was selling. That's how he got his start.
Yeah.
And I remember I went over to his house one time. This is maybe 10 years ago now. And I look into his dining room. His whole dining room's converted into like a warehouse, right?
Yeah.
And there was pile after pile with little pieces of paper on top, pile after pile. There must have been 50 piles that he had to ship out. And we're hanging out. We do all of our game stuff, and it's like 10 p.m. And he just walks into the dining room. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, or isn't it bedtime? He's like, oh no, I gotta ship all these out. And he and his beautiful wife Leah, they just together as a little team. Like they got 4 kids, or at that time it might have been that, and then they just packaged all. And I'm like, then they became shipping clerks, and I helped. Of course, I helped. Hated every minute of it. I'm like, this sucks. I'm a guest, and I hate it. It's only one day,
right?
And I asked him one day. I said, "How do you?" This is like year 3. I'm like, "How do you do this and not want to kill yourself?" He's like, "I don't know." He's like, "I get pleasure." I get little joy thinking about when that person gets their package and opens it up, and they're like all excited. That was the fuel that, like, for him made his hobby turn into a job. And he did that for many years until we kind of hear about this now with Amazon doing this, where eBay, I think, made the fees so, like, it was before they were professional eBayers, and then they made the fees so astronomically high that became not worth it.
Right. Yep.
And the custom stuff too, because he would ship a lot international because they don't have access to the same stuff we do. You know. So anyway. So okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Open world gaming. So I want to talk to you. Our most recent one of those was V Rising, and I would love your tips and tricks for people listening if they're playing any quote sandbox survival game. These are games in my mind like Ark, Valheim. Most recent one, V Rising.
Yep.
And specifically too, I find what happens is because there's not exactly a carrot, a breadcrumb quest line like you find in WoW, I get lost, not encouraged, or just don't know what to do. So and you've given me lots of tips on this, and I'd love you to share that.
Yeah. So, right, like I love the survival genre like that. And it could be anything, right? It could be like Satisfactory. I just like the crafting. I like automation, stuff like that. So for me, that's the drive, is like that crafting, the automation, building cool structures, hanging out with friends. But the thing with the survival games is typically you have to be okay with making your own fun. Right. It's there. Yeah. V Rising, it has quests and it's got that like carrot that drives you forward to the next objective. But you saw what happened when we got to the end, right? Like, and those objectives were then gone and taken away. I didn't want to log in. Like, I stopped playing the game because I didn't have that carrot, right? Whereas with like a game like Ark that has 0 carrots, you make your own fun. I mean, we played that game for a year, I think, between when we spun up another server with like Will and Dave and a bunch of us, right? Like we played that for months and months and months. So,
and tell people what V Rising is, what Ark is, and what Valheim is, in case.
Sure. So, survival crafting games. They can be first person, they can be third person. It depends on, and there's a ton of them, right? Like we're just listed 3, but there's like Rust, 7 Days to Die.
Right.
I mean, there's a ton.
I just downloaded Core Keeper. Core Keeper is what led me to V Rising.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a ton of them. There's the indie titles, there's the AAA versions, like a bunch of games. But basically the premise is you start off with nothing, right? Like you get Ark, you get dropped on the beach with nothing but your junk in your hands. Can I say that on this podcast? Sorry, guys. Send any complaints to russwakeland@gmail.com. I don't know if that's the email address, but anyway. So, right, like you get dropped on this beach, you have nothing. Like you're literally sitting there buck naked with your hands. And you have to like collect a couple stones and then some sticks to make an axe, to then be able to mine iron, to then build a smelter, to then take that iron ore and smelt it in iron bars, to then make. Anyway, it's a treadmill of there's components of crafting. So you've got to build a shelter, right? Typically most survival games have things like temperature. You have to eat enough food to stay alive. You got to drink enough water so you don't dehydrate. And there's a bunch of those types of systems in these types of games.
Yeah.
So you have to build a shelter so you can survive the cold winter nights or whatever that looks like. Or like The Forest, it's actually a survival game, but it's mixed with horror. So you have to like keep the cannibals away at night while you're sleeping because they'll sneak up on you while you're sleeping and eat your face. I don't know. But right, so you got to like build a house. You've got to build tools to then move through. Think about it like eras of time, right? Like you start off in the classical era and then you move to, I don't know, whatever came after that, Renaissance, and then the modern and industrial age, right? And you're doing that same thing in the course of this game, right? Like you start off and you're mining things by hand. Then eventually you might get a drill that lets you mine faster. And then you might get an excavator that mines by itself, and you take all the stuff that comes out of the excavator via conveyor belt and it goes into a blast furnace for you, right? So you start off small. And there's a carrot in front of you, as in progression, where you need to go from hand mining to automated mining to then be able to build the iron walls that will actually protect you from the big bad guys that you're hanging out with, right? So it's that gameplay loop. And there's always something next to move towards. So whether you're playing Ark or a game like V Rising or an Ark, right? You're stuck on a deserted island with a bunch of dinosaurs that want to eat your face. You can tame those dinosaurs and make those dinosaurs go out and mine for you or carry more supplies for you, right? And so the dinosaur is that actual tier of production, whereas V Rising, you're a vampire in a survival genre. So you can't go out during the day because you'll burn. You have to like stick to the shadows. And as you evolve and you beat bosses, you gain new powers, which lets you beat other bosses, and you get new crafting rests. So like, I'm trying to think of a good example. You might need leather armor, right? So you have to go beat up a bunch of stuff, strip them of their leather, then take it back to the tanning bench and process it into something to turn it into something else. And it's very, very manual. You have to gather it all by hand. But then once you've kind of moved on to the next tier, you gain a recipe that lets you like craft that super fast, do that whole thing that maybe took you a day before, you can now do in an hour, so you can do something else that it would take you a day to do, right? So the carrot in those types of games is typically moving to that next tier and automating what came before.
I didn't realize that, actually, because that's what, well, before I go there. So one thing I've learned about survival games that I didn't know was there's different granularities of it. Yep. And I think the reason why I like V Rising, and then Valheim has this, and I think Core Keeper has this, why it's so popular, is they found that sort of sweet spot of balance of, okay, you can't go out into the sunlight, but it's doable. You still can go through the day by running shadow to shadow. Yep. It's not that sort of annoying level of like, gosh, dang it, I'm out of water. I forgot to fill up my water skin. My water meter is going boop, 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 and now I'm dead in the middle of the world. And I'm not faulting games to do that. There's probably survival gamers out there that love that edge.
Yep.
But I've learned I love kid glove edge of survival or something like that. So.
Yeah. And I'd say Ark is like an extreme survival game, right? Like you get 0 carrots. Like I said, like you start off buck naked with nothing at all, or even somebody pointing you in a direction, right? Where V Rising, it's a little more kid glove friendly. So if like, I would say somebody came to me, I like gaming, recommend a survival game to me, I wouldn't recommend Ark as your first stop. Like that's like throwing a 5-year-old into the deep end that doesn't know how to swim, right? But something like V Rising, there's quests, even the progression, there's not as many items. There's like, they feed you along the way and it kind of slowly progresses. And it was a good progression. Like I was surprised you stuck with it, because typically survival games, you play it for a little bit and they fall flat because you don't have that goal. V Rising did a good job of putting those goals in place and taking tried and true systems from other survival games and implementing them still, but just doing it in a way that makes sense to people that aren't familiar with survival games.
I learned for myself that where you and Dave and other of our gaming friends, Christian, I think, like the self-satisfaction of going through the tiers, what happens to me is after the newness of the game, let's say 4 hours in, I'm mining some ore, I immediately begin to think to myself, I'm like, I could spend an hour, mine ore and WoW, sell it in the auction house and make 80 gold. Like somehow that to me becomes like worth it, or I'm getting towards some sort of end. Whereas just to mine the ore to then be able to make the iron sword, I'm like, who cares? I don't know what the difference is. So what's fun for you when you're like, there's no other people, it's just you being able to make that next tier?
So it's interesting. I think part of it is I don't enjoy survival games that are single player nearly as much. So, right, but you like Satisfactory. That's true. Satisfactory is kind of a unique one, because that is the one thing but Satisfactory as a game is really built for like the solo player, right? They let you play it multiplayer, but the way the world is designed, in my opinion, it didn't really lend as much to like a multiplayer experience, because with Satisfactory, as you get up in the higher tiers, you're basically, when you look at the world map, right, you're basically using every single part of that world map to pull in all these different resources to then craft all this stuff. So there's not really room for multiple people to be in the same world and have enough resources to go around, right? So, and I like playing a survival game where I don't want to start a base with a friend. I want to start my own base. I want you to have your own base. I want us to then get together and do some of the progression, like, hey, let's go beat a boss together. Hey, let's go gather this together. But then we go back to our own bases and do our own thing. And that's where I like the survival genre, and not Satisfactory, but like the arcs and stuff like that, because playing with somebody else, it's like, and similar to what you talked about with WoW, right? Like you can take that thing, you can sell it for some gold. You can then take that gold and buy a cool pet. So then when you're hanging out with your friends, you can be like, hey, check out my cool pet.
Yes.
Same thing with art, right? Like, hey, I built this awesome this factory. It takes dinosaurs and automatically turns them into
spaceships
and cooks them or something. I don't know. But like, but then you can kind of show off that digital crap to somebody else, where, when you're playing a game by yourself, especially in the survival genre, is like, hey, I built this and I can show myself, I don't know, loses its luster. So most of the time, survival games, I just like playing with friends, and it's partially right, like getting together and accomplishing goals, and like our group of friends, we're not super serious. We'll hop in a game, joke around, make a bunch of bad jokes, and laugh our butts off and do stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whereas like with something like a Satisfactory or a single player RPG, where you're in a story and stuff, but you lose that ability to show off your digital crap to somebody else, I guess. I don't know. It's as simple as that.
I think what I'm recognizing too with survival games, and at least our core group of friends, and it's funny, we even tried to put some limiters on this, and we did. I think we did a good job. Sure. Is that I'm a very slow gamer. I tend to sniff the roses a lot. Like I'll go down learning how to cook stuff, which isn't really, that relevant to things, or just real life. Like after 2 hours, I'll just sort of be like, I can't sit in this chair anymore. I get squirrely. So what'll happen is you guys will all advance so far ahead of me, which then, even though you're not giving me materials or giving me whatever, it's like this is what happened with V Rising was I was really enjoying it when everybody was maybe 5 or 6 levels ahead of me, so that when you would come help kill a boss, I still was doing something to make the fight progress.
Right.
Like Dave got to be like 20 levels ahead at some point, and I was like, he's like, hey, I'll help you kill a boss. And he asked, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to just hang back and plink arrows or what? And that's when the balloon went, because I was like, oh, well, now I'm not even killing a boss. I'm just going to the boss to then make the plate armor that I don't even need, because Dave will just kill all the boss, or whoever, it could have been you. It's not specific to Dave.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I've learned. But what I've learned in WoW is that boss, like if we're both level 70, it's still hard for you to kill.
Right.
You can't just stomp on. Now we can go to a level 30 boss and stomp on it, but guess what? I can too when I'm level 70.
Sure.
So it's not that I'm against God mode. Sometimes God mode's super fun. Mm-hmm. But since I'm always trailing, the balloon gets out of the air so much quicker.
I think you're a victim of hanging out with a bunch of, like, I'm going to just say min-max, like, and like, look, like I've got a son, but his mom and I are separated. I get 50% of my time to do whatever the heck I want. So like I can binge play and I can be level 30 in the time it takes you to get to level 5. Like, right. And so like your group of friends is good and it's bad, right? Like, but at least like we all respect each other to like, let's put some boundaries in place. This is how I want to enjoy my game. Please respect that, and so that way everybody can still have fun. And I think we did pretty good. I think, right. The divide got bigger and bigger as time went on, right? Like we got to end game, you were mid game or something like that.
We did do pretty good.
Yeah. But I think it depends on the game, right? Like certain games have really good scaling mechanics, and other games don't. You end up with, oh, hey, this guy that he can put in 60 hours to my 20 every single week. Like, okay, yeah, he's going to walk in with his nuclear rocket launcher and obliterate this thing when it would normally be a challenge for me. And once you lose that risk reward, right in order to make a reward worthwhile, you have to have some sort of risk in getting that reward. There has to be, we talk about this with like D&D, right? Like if you've got a DM that refuses to kill a character and you don't really think there's ever going to be a time where, hey, there's this big elder dragon. And for those that don't know, right, like those are nasty and you wouldn't want to attack them at level 5. But if you know your DM's never going to kill you for attacking this thing that's way too difficult, then who gives a crap and it stops being fun. But if like he could kill my character and I've invested like a year of time into this, when you get that loot from that dragon, it means something. I risked my life and a year of this playtime to get this thing that for most people, it's pretty intangible and it doesn't really mean anything. But like, if you don't have that risk reward, you lose the luster in those games. And I think that's what happens when you end up playing with folks that move a little faster than you. You lose the risk. And then the reward doesn't mean anything, right? Like if you would have beaten that boss by yourself, it would have been amazing. You would have felt really good about having item XYZ.
That's the other challenge I find. So I'm wondering if you have any tips for people is I'm just not skilled enough to beat the boss at level, or near at level. So where you guys were climbing the tech tree, by like I heard Dave saying things like, oh yeah, it took me 8 tries before he could kill the boss. I get frustrated after 2 because I don't even get close. It's not like I get if I get the boss down and I'm like, oh, I believe I could do it. I just need to know them. Yeah, then it's enticing. But typically I'm like, oh crap. Like I either just don't know the mechanics that they're going to do, or I'm not quick enough on the thumbstick, or I don't know. It's a whole podcast of why I suck at taking down bosses. But, are there what tips would you give me if you're going to take a boss on you? Like, what I mean by that is I was playing a stealth game, one of the Tom Clancy games with Dave. I was just playing it. This was like 20 years ago. And Dave came over the house and I'm like, I cannot get past this room. And I watched him and he kicks the door open, just runs straight through the room, shotguns whoever's in the way. And I was like, I was trying to stealth because it's a stealth game. And I would get detected and killed. He's like, nah, sometimes with these games, you just have to blow everybody's heads off. And I was like, I didn't even know that. And here's another tip he gave me once. He was like, you got to pick one thing. Like if you're going to pick shotguns, you pick shotguns all the way. Don't pick shotgun, then rocket launcher, then machine gun, which is what I would do. I'm like, I just didn't know. So are there open world Sandcrafty sort of tips like that you can give?
I mean, that's very game dependent, right? Like every survival game has its own mechanics, has its own thing.
What would you say for V Rising?
Right. V Rising, I'd say part of it is, pick a weapon type and stick with it. V Rising, it gave you could pick like 6 different weapons.
Okay.
It took a long time to craft one of them. So pick a weapon, learn what you like, and then be happy with that and stick to it. Because if you're making those 5 weapons every time you change tiers, you're slowing yourself down from other progression. You're also losing that muscle memory of like how the weapon might work. Same thing with skill trees, right? Like V Rising really didn't have this because you could just take skills away, move them around, do whatever the heck you want. And it was easy to change them on the fly. But some games have skill trees that you're stuck to for a while, or you get a respec at some point. But if you spread yourself too thin, right, it's jack of all trades is the master of none. And typically in these types of games, you really almost need to be more of a master of one thing to do really well at it, right? Like you wouldn't want to run one of these games, and we play a lot of these games. I'm trying to explain it to people that might not be familiar with it, but like, let's say this game needs a tank, a healer, and some DPS, right? You wouldn't want to run a group with a healer that's like, oh yeah, I've got 2 skills in heals, but I've got 4 skills in DPS, and I can also do a little bit of tanking, right? Like that person's not going to do what they need to do in the game because they've kind of spread themselves out.
I'm thinking about, I'm even thinking about in V Rising, I'm realizing something like, when you encounter a boss, at level, let's say you're 2 levels above the boss. Do you need to pause?
Yeah, just 1 sec.
Okay, no problem. All right, we're back. So I remember, let's say you're 2 levels gear above the boss, right?
Sure.
I think I'm now realizing something I didn't do in V Rising. It's like, you guys actually like try to look at what the boss mechanics are, and you might look at your powers and be like, oh, I've got the wrong power up. I really should have a slow power up. You hit him and it slows the boss. Is that sort of like, what do you do when you encounter a boss and let's say you get it down to 40% health and you just can't seem to do it? You've done it 10 times and you can't do it. Do you tell yourself you need to have more gear? Are you like, maybe there's a potion I need?
Yeah. So I consider myself a fairly proficient gamer. So if I can't beat a boss, it's probably because I don't have the right gear. I might and in survival games, right? Like you might have a boss that uses in V Rising, right? Like they holy blast you, and because you're a vampire, it hurts you more. You might need a holy resistance potion or something like that, right? And we play a lot of games like MMOs or other types of games where potions are trivial or food buffs are trivial, or like, oh, your gear doesn't matter, player skill matters more. And that's why I said it's dependent on the game, because in V Rising, it was very, very gear dependent. I mean, yeah, there's some player skill involved, right? Like with timing your attacks and making sure they land. But if you didn't have all of your gear updated, if you didn't run with the right potions and the right resistances, like boss fights were stupid difficult. But once you had all those things and you had the right skills loaded out and stuff like that, the boss ended up being somewhat trivial. So I think there's a certain, and this is very specific to V Rising, don't fight things above your weight class and make sure you're properly equipped to go into that situation and win, right? And some of it is you could pre-research, some of it you could throw your face up against the wall 6 times before you realize something's not working. But yeah, being open to making changes in those fights, right? Like, yeah, we might run around the world with all these big AoE abilities that spreads the damage out across 20 guys because you're clearing out all this stuff. But then you get to the boss, there's only one guy there. Don't keep using that AoE ability on that one guy. You're losing your damage potential. So you might need to, before you start that fight, switch your AoE ability to like one big massive fireball that hits him in the face and does 10 times the damage. So yeah, and survival games are very much like this. And that's why I like it is each thing that you go to do, it probably requires you to be very specific, like Ark, right? Like if you're going to the frozen tundra wasteland to beat a woolly mammoth up for their fur, you're not going to go out there in your underwear and your summer shirt, right? Like you actually have to dress up.
I would. I think that's my problem, to be honest.
Yeah. And that's where you need to analyze the situation. Wear your fur outfit that's heat insulated, so then you're not freezing while fighting the mammoth. And then maybe you need like, I don't know, a T-Rex to come along with you because the mammoth's so big or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just go through the game with blinders on because they're not easy. Like survival, there's a reason why it's called a survival game. You're going to die. You're going to die a lot. And you're probably going to lose a lot of your shit and have to get more of those things.
Now
right?
I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to lay out the scenario and I'd like to know why you think it's fun, because to me, it makes me want to jump into moving traffic and get killed in real life. Okay. All right. I call up Ryan to kill the woolly mammoth and he's like, okay, you need the furs and you need the special spear and you need the T-Rex mini pet. Right. And I get all that. Awesome. And then I'm running to the woolly mammoth and then the velociraptor comes out and eats my face and I'm dead. And my stuff's like either half destroyed or gone. And then I got to run out to my body, but I'm naked. So then I die again and I get killed again and I get killed again. How is it that you and Greg and Dave and Will, everybody thinks that's fun?
Risk reward. I like the challenge of finding something difficult and through perseverance, skills, hard work, patience, you figure out what you need to do to get past that. And then when you get past that, you get that item, that feels freaking good, right? Like, I mean, I spent a lot of time working on this. This unlocked this thing for me, which benefits my character in XYZ way. But the challenge, like if there's no challenge, right? If I walk up to every single dinosaur and I punch them in the eye and they fall over and die, that's not fun, right? Like there's no risk or reward. There's no risk there. So but I'll go and play a game like Elden Ring or like Dark Souls. That's too punishing for me, right? Like I don't want to run the risk of, like I enjoyed Dark Souls. It was fun, but it got old after a while, like literally needing to throw my body at this guy 25 times to figure out the millisecond I needed to dodge and, to get past. So you'd hate those games. Don't even bother. But
so you are me in that tier, basically.
Yeah, sure. Right. Like, but that's, I think there's a certain, like, that's where a good survival game has difficulty without it being impossible difficulty, right? The challenge, if you use common sense, you do your research, you overgear yourself, like there, and that's the thing. There's multiple solutions to those bosses, right? Like you could wait until you're 5 levels higher, then go kill them.
So that was one of the things. Can you do that in V Rising? Because that was one of the things that I wish they had, is if I could allow myself to become overgeared, but I couldn't because you need the boss to get the recipe to become overgeared.
So with V Rising, when you unlock the recipe, that was like the easy mode way of getting that item, right? So let's take, I don't know, hard leather, right? Okay, so you're fighting this boss, and when you beat him, you will get the recipe for hard leather so you can craft it back at your base, right?
Yes,
then you can craft hundreds of those.
Yes.
But before that, you might be able to go over to this neighboring village and kill the horses, and they give you hard leather, but you might have to grind like 5 or 6 of them before that rare drop occurs, right? So I can either throw my face up against that boss 6 times in the hopes that I get lucky and dodge all of his attacks and beat him, or I could come over here and I could maybe grind out these horses for a little bit, get the leather that I need to craft the gear that then puts me on par with the boss to then automate that later. And there was always other stuff to craft with.
I didn't realize that.
You might be able to make, like you might want to make that. You get the leather from grinding and you make the chest piece, which then gets you a little bit closer to being able to beat the boss. Then once you beat the boss, then you might be able to make the gloves and the pants and the boots in like 5 minutes, because now you have the recipe to do it really quickly. So again, so that's how I would address that in like a V Rising game is, yeah, you can choose to go the difficult route. And sometimes I do that, right? Like I might just throw myself at the boss 3 times because I'm pretty sure I could beat him if I've got the right skills and I can dodge this attack better or whatever that looks like. But there were bosses where like some of the vampire hunters that are like, those are gross. So I wouldn't even bother with those at even level or even 2 levels above. Like I would wait until I was 5 or 6 levels above. I'd go in with a resistance potion. I ground out like some crap to make silver resistance potions, and then I would go fight him, and then the fight was like, oh, this wasn't so bad. But if I would have tried it before, I would have gotten
that is key. Yeah, I tend to not have the patience for that. So like the death run we're talking about with the woolly mammoth would be, I know the answer. The answer is I have to have a whole complete other set of armor and weapons in my chest. So when I wake up, I can don that. And I never do because I'm like, I just want to get the woolly mammoth. I don't know why I'm in such a rush. Like I told you that about Final Fantasy the other day. I realized that I play these games in some sort of rush. Like I've literally been like, recently I've been like, okay, you're here to play the game. You don't have to rush through it. But when I played WoW or when I play Lord of the Rings, I'm not rushed. I don't understand why.
I think that's the difference between like, and for your listeners, right? Survival games are not games that you play with hundreds of thousands of people like WoW or Final Fantasy or an MMO, right? This is not a massive multiplayer online game. This is typically a private server where anywhere between 2 to maybe 10 of your closest friends are on this server together, right? And so I think you've got FOMO, right? When you play a small survival game with all of your close friends who binge play these games a lot, you're trying to rush because you're trying to keep up with us, because
I never thought of that.
You fall too far behind.
Yeah.
When you're playing an MMO, oh, my friends are all ahead of me. Who cares? I'm going to use the dungeon finder to just group up with a bunch of randoms and then still get the content done, right? So you're not feeling like you have to keep up.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. That's right. I wish what I want to see. I'm not done with, we're done. Our server's done. You know, I got to gear level like 46. You guys got to like 80, left the 3 bosses. What I'm waiting for V Rising, I hope they put it in, is what they did for Core Keeper. Like Dave and I have Core Keeper. And what they did there was I have my worlds generated and you, Ryan, can pop in. So that way, if I am running against the boss, you can pop. Now, you could be uber geared, but I don't seem to care because I've tried the boss, and then, and you don't need the boss to get the gear in this particular game. You need the boss to advance the story, but you're not gated there. Like I happened to kill a mob and I got this super rare in Core Keeper, this super rare flame staff that like shoots these really powerful fireballs. Like Dave has not even seen that weapon in his game at all. He was like, how'd you get that? I didn't know it was a super. So that's already given me an edge over bosses. But where I was going with that is I can smack my face against the boss, do some grinding. Oh, I'm a little bit stuck. Dave can pop in, kill the boss. Thank you. He can pop out, you know?
Right.
So I'm waiting, but Verizon, we don't have that option.
Yeah, yet. But I think so. Valheim was kind of the first game that really did that well, right?
Oh, they have that with Valheim?
Yeah, Valheim, you can have your character and you can play it on your own map. You could play it on 5 of your own maps, right? Like you can have a map where you have your base. You can have a map where you go to Farm Iron. You have a map but that character lives and gets teleported to each one of those instances. Same thing when somebody comes in from their world, they can play on their world. You could say, hey, Dave, I need help. And then Dave can log into your world with his character and all of his stuff, and you guys can go do stuff together. So Valheim was the first survival game that really did that well, right? Usually your character is tied to this map, that's tied to this server, that's with these 10 people that you game with. And if you want to go play on another server, you're going to be stuck with a bunch of
V Rising, Emmy came in. Hold on, we'll pause again.
Yep.
She's going to mow the lawn. Hold on. All right, hey listeners out there, thanks for your patience. What we're going to do is we're going to stop here for Hollywood Minute with Ryan, part 1, and we're going to do Hollywood Minute part 2. We're going to go a little longer, but we'll break this into 2 segments since these are only pips. So stay tuned for part 2 in a little bit.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.